All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Bettina Moss from Cryptonormal Encounters with B Moss. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show tonight.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've wanted to talk to you forever. So let's get into it, right? Some people may not know who you are. So before we get into your encounter stories, let's tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what got you into the scripted world.
Well, I have been a fan of several different cryptid shows and podcasts on YouTube for years. Started off listening to Bigfoot shows first, Sasquatch Chronicles, Bigfoot Outlaw Radio, several different shows and stuff like that. And I always believed from the time I was a teenager or a child, even when they had the National Enquirer and so, National Enquirer out back in the day, and they would have Bigfoot in there, the Loch Ness monster. So I always believed in stuff like that, even back then, aliens. And I used to watch Unsolved Mysteries and shows like Sightings that were back in, I guess, like the early '90s, '80s and '90s. So I always had a belief in that stuff. So years later, I think probably around 2006, 2005, 2006, when Monster Quest came out, I was watching those shows, and then I came across watching those Bigfoot shows and listening to those podcasts that I would listen to on the Bigfoot stuff that I was listening to. I'd never heard of Dogman at that point, and it came up and suggested videos one day, so I started getting into listening to Vic Condiff, Britton Sawin, Mysteries to Search, and different channels that were talking about Dogman. So I started listening to it. At that point, I'd never had a Dogman encounter yet, and I never even thought I would. I believed in it right off because listening to the encounters, the heartfelt emotion, the tears, and the just sheer terror you could hear in some of the people's voices. There were so many encounters being shared that I just felt like there's no way that all these people are lying about their encounters. So, um, because of that, I listened to them from I guess 2007, 2008, whenever I first started listening to Dogman Encounters. But I can't remember exactly what year that came out. But I listened to it every year. 2013 rolled around, and I was actually, well, I guess before I go into my first encounter, I'll go into my encounter and tell you why I started the group. But so 2013 rolled around, and when 2013 rolled around, every year during hunting season, because I was married at the time, every year during hunting season, my ex husband would go hunting, and he'd be gone sometimes 3 or 4 days. So I would actually take that time and go spend the weekends with my parents. And so when I would go over there for the weekend, I'd be there Friday, Saturday, come back Sunday, and get ready to go to work Monday. So it was just like any other weekend that I would go to their house. They had like a carport where two vehicles are able to park underneath there, and then on the outside there's another, extended driveway over to the side. So anytime I got there, my dad parked on that extended driveway. So anytime I got over to their house, the only option I had was to park down on the street below under this tree, like it was on basically next to the sidewalk under that tree. Their backyard borders the woods or the entrance into the woods. Um, Directly behind their backyard, there is where it's sometimes a cotton field, just depending on whatever crop that they plant that year. Now it's a cornfield. They don't live there anymore, but I still every now and then will drive by there. But sometimes it's a soybean field. But there's a trail that leads back into the woods. Now, on this one particular night when I had my first dogman encounter, I pull up to the curb next to the house. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and this is in November. I remember that because I remember thinking, next week is Thanksgiving. I was thinking about all the food mom's gonna have, and so I'm, sitting in the car, and since I believed in Dogman, but I still never thought I'd have one. It still made me cautious because I knew that the woods bordered their house, so I would never just get out of the car and just I always brought a lot of stuff with me when I would go. So I've got a full suitcase. Even though I'm packing for 2 days, really, I would pack for 3 or 4 days because I'm just extra like that. And then I would have a whole makeup box and all this other crap that is ridiculous to even pack that much stuff for days. But since I was already kind of scared about that, it's dark outside and there's the entrance to the woods. There's no street lights on that end. So what I would do when I would pull up, I would actually whatever I can gather from the passenger seat or the floor on the passenger side, I would gather that up, like, and I would gather my purse and everything that I could grab, so that when I get out of the car, all I've got to do is go to the back door and take the suitcase out and roll it up. Thank God that night that I did that, because sometimes I didn't always think about that. On that particular night, I did gather the stuff, and then after that, now the car's still running. When I pulled up to the curb, I didn't cut the car off immediately like I usually do, and maybe I wasn't supposed to, because if I had, now thinking about it, if I had, I wouldn't have saw what I saw. So when I looked up from gathering all the stuff on the floor and the front seat and all that kind of stuff, when I looked up, I looked straight ahead. The headlights are still on, shining straight ahead down that path into the woods. I have a 2008 Cadillac CTS. The reason I'm telling this is because anybody who's ever been in those cars or who has a car like that, you know that the headlights on that particular car is garbage. They kind of low beam lights that just flare out. It's not a good headlight at all. I mean, it's garbage. So I looked back up from gathering the stuff in the front seat, looked straight ahead, and when I looked up, I was like, oh my God, I know that's not what I think it is. So at this moment, still your mind is like, what, yeah, right. But I said, I know, is my mom playing tricks on me? So I put the high beams on. And when I put the high beams on, what I was looking at, I couldn't believe it. I know, like, when I get nervous, I get to smiling or whatever and smirking about stuff, and it's not funny. But it was one of those moments like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I'm seeing this right now. Because at that moment, like, my reaction was like, I don't even, shit just got real. That's how I felt at that moment. I'm looking, and a tear started rolling down my eye, because I'm looking at for, I'm not, when I say werewolf, I'm not talking about from the standpoint of a man that's just shape shifted into a wolf or werewolf, not in that term, but as far as the stature, the body, what we know when you see Van Helsing or the Underworld or any of those movies like that. That's what I was looking at. I'm looking at a creature that is about, if I had to guess, 8.5 to 9 feet tall. It's not standing behind leaves or trees or anything like that. I'm looking at this thing in the broad open. There's nothing obstructing it. I'm seeing the whole body from head to toe. It's jet black. And I know I said that there was no headlights back there, but at this point, I'd put the high beams on it. And if you've heard people talk about Dogman before, you may have heard them talk about how sometimes they're darker than the darkness. I'm tripping right now just thinking about it, because this thing is 8.5 to 9 feet tall. The general explanation of what you hear people talk about when it comes to Dogman is the German Shepherd type head with the tall ears, the tufts of hair on top. This Dogman and the elongated snout. I have seen that one before, but that's not the one I saw during that first encounter. The one during this encounter, it had more of a broad Rottweiler or pit bull type head with a shorter snout, the shorter cropped. You've seen the pit bulls before that have the cropped ears. It had that. It had the cropped ears, the short cropped ears, the short snout. It had the upper body of a bodybuilder. Yeah, a bodybuilder. It had the tapered waist of, I guess, like you have a bodybuilder and they've got the tapered waist. If you just bring it down, narrow it. And then the leg style, it had, like, if you stood your dog on its hind legs, it had the hawk style legs and the, foot structure. And it looks like, how that, I don't know what you call that foot, but I always kind of compare that to like a woman, like when we wear high heels, your foot is like at that angle. I don't know what you call that. I don't know if that's digitigrade or whatever that is, the dog style foot. So I'm looking at this. Now, when I put the high beams, now I forgot to mention, originally, what I first saw when I first looked up, it was not facing me. Its back was to me. And I think that it was probably like, if I just remain still long enough, then this person will get out of the car and go in the house or go where they go, and I'll never have been seen. But I believe that when I put the high beams on it like that, I think that at that moment, That's when I'm just trying to guess what it might have been thinking in its mind. I've been spotlighted now. I've been spotlighted. So it turned to face me. So that's how I was able to see its face and all that kind of stuff. I saw it from the back, looking at it from behind to begin with, and then it went from looking at it from behind to looking at it straight on. It did not have the amber eyes. It had these luminescent, like you know how they say the luminescent, um, self illuminating eyes, or like the amber colored eyes. It didn't have that. It had the eyes that were like that beautiful blue, ocean blue color, but luminescent, like glowing blue eyes. And it made eye contact with me for about 8 to 10 seconds, and it's looking through the windshield. I'm looking at it, it's looking at me, and I'm thinking in my head, please God, don't let that thing walk over here, because this will be one of those times where my automatic doors don't lock, because sometimes those doors would not lock. Sometimes I pull up at home and my husband would come out to the car, and when you drive off, it's supposed to lock, or when you bag up or park, those doors usually lock on their own. But sometimes it didn't work. And I just said, please don't let that thing walk over here. This will be one of those times the doors didn't lock. And as I said that, immediately what I heard back in my head was, oh, it's just you. No big deal. Now, a lot of people talk about mind speak when it comes to Dogman. If I had to say that mind speak happened at all, because I'm not one of those people who say, well, they speak to me. But I'll never discount somebody else's experience ever. I mean, because something is not my experience, I'll never discount anybody else. But if mind speak ever happened to me with Dogman, I will say that night, that's the one and only time I can say that happened. But while I said that, it's what I heard in my head was, oh, it's just you. No big deal. It casually turned its back and continued on, I guess, what was its original path before I pulled up and parked and stopped it in its tracks. So it continued on, and this whole time it's on 2 feet. It never was on all fours from the beginning of me seeing it to the end of it. It never went down on all fours. It continued. After it said, it's just you, no big deal, it walked off and continued on down that path into the woods. At that point, every time after that, I never would go to, I would go to my parents' house at night, but I never would pull up at night and just get out of the car anymore. From that point on, if I pulled up and it was nighttime, I would call inside the house and I'd say, Daddy, I'm outside. Can you open the door, turn on the floodlights, and stand there the entire time until I unload everything out the car or come out here and help me? I never went, I never did that anymore after that. That was my last night of, matter of fact, I'm a smoker. I didn't go outside anymore at night to smoke after that. Because now in my mind was, when you see one, there's more. That's not the only one back there. And I saw this one by accident. Because a majority of the time when it comes to Dogman or Bigfoot, you usually see them peeking out from behind trees and stuff. You don't usually see them out in the open like that. I caught that one off guard. And I think that's what happened with that.
Yeah, I definitely can understand why you would not just hop out of the car for sure. I don't think I would do that either. And the thing is, when you're talking about pulling up to their house, I'm curious about what is the area like around. I know you say it had some woods behind it. What was the area like? Was this like in a subdivision? Was the woods like hundreds of acres behind them? Kind of give us a description of what the area around the house is like.
So this is in city limits. This is not in the country. Um, but even though this is in the city limits, and I'll send you pictures of this after the show. But so the cotton field, beyond that cotton field, it's kind of hard to explain. So there's a cotton field that's behind all the houses, like behind the houses. Like this is the neighborhood. So, but it's bordered. It's kind of, I don't know how you call it. Like, I guess if you put a border behind it on both sides, the woods borders that, almost kind of boxes that cotton field in. Does that make sense? But most people, like growing up in my childhood, going back down that trail, into the woods, we would only go so far. It's a trail that goes down and you can kind of circle through the woods and come out on the other end of the neighborhood. But deeper back, once you get back there into the woods, we stayed on the trail. Everybody stayed on the trail, but I went back there in actually August of last year, and I went back there with two other people. And when I got back there, I actually one of the guys that was back there was actually a member of the group. He actually said, "Look at this opening right here." And there was an opening in these bushes, in the trees, like further going deeper back into the woods, which I never looked back that far before. He said, "This is big enough for something big to come through here." He said, "Do you see this opening, like how the grass is pushed down here?" And I wanted to go back there so bad because I don't know, that's stupid. It sounds ridiculous, but you know how in the daytime you're brave. There's two other people with you. So it's like, oh my God, like there's no telling what we might find back there. So I'm in the mind of a researcher then. So so even though it seems like it's shallow woods, it's not. I just had never gone back that far, but I saw once we were back there, there's a whole nother area that goes further into the deep woods, and the other person was scared to go any further back. They were scared to go any further back, and it's kind of good because it ended up storming and pouring down raining not too long after that. But it was just creepy. We did get footprints while we were back there. I do have a footprint of something that is not any animal that I've ever seen before. It wasn't a dog footprint. It's elongated. It's got tracks. But so it's in the city limits, but it's heavily wooded behind their neighborhood.
And I ask that because I've done so many shows. I'm 200 plus shows into the Sasquatch Odyssey now, and it's you're the second person that I've had on the show that has had an encounter with a dogman creature.
Hmm.
And all the time when people are listening to Bigfoot encounters, for example, everybody thinks that they have to happen like Ron Moorhead's. You got to be 8 miles deep into the woods of the Pacific Northwest for you to have these encounters. And the more people I've interviewed over this last couple of years, it's it's become clear to me, and I've said it on the show many times. I think these things live on the fringe, a lot closer in to where we are than we would think. My property here in North Carolina, we have 40 acres here, and
Hmm.
I can drive for 9 minutes and I'm at a Walmart supercenter.
Hmm.
But my nearest neighbor is a half a mile away, and I'm surrounded by hundreds of acres of woods. So it's like the perfect place. And I know people in this area who have had Sasquatch encounters. We've heard things and experienced things here on the property we can't explain. So I asked that question specifically because I've had people on the show that have had Bigfoot encounters in subdivisions in these rural
Hmm.
areas. So it's not all about you got to be really deep in the woods. It can be a situation. It sounds perfect for what you saw in the area that you were in.
I well, there's also a pond back there. There's fish in it. There's also deer that are back there because I remember my parents. I grew up in that house. They moved in there in like 1985, so I grew up there. There's always been deer. There's been possums. There's skunks. Every other animal that you can possibly think of. So there's plenty of food back there. Then, of course, like the cornfield now. I mean, there's plenty of things for them to eat. The pond, there's plenty of tree cover. Um, I found a nest back there, one of their nests, I guess. Um, they're weird because I know, people talk about the woo factor when it comes to these things. And I have seen that. I've seen them, and it's really weird. So I know that I know that they can be flesh and blood. I know that I'm just going to put it to you like this because none of us know exactly what these things are, but I do know that I've seen a lot. Flesh and blood, I do believe that they're flesh and blood. I believe also that they are supernatural at the same time because of some of the things that I've witnessed with my own eyes when it comes to these. I've seen um, them go from nothing at all to completely like manifesting before my very eyes. I've seen this. I've also caught on audio before, and I guess, and I know this sounds weird, so, and I always tell people like everybody's experience is not the next person's experience. It's weird to me still thinking about it because I would never have been a person that would have thought that this is possible before, but I've actually audio recorded before and actually heard what sounded like, I guess if I were forward and whisper in your ear. I'm that close to you, but I'm invisible. The biggest dog or animal sniffing and grunting and snorting like right next to your head. Grunting, growling, and snorting, but I never heard it in real time. It wasn't until after the audio recording was over with that I actually went back and heard this. Now, also associated with this weirdness is, and I brought this up on my show one time, a couple, actually several times. Another strange thing that I've caught on audio when it comes to Dogman. I can't say it's Dogman. I don't know what to call it, but I know that almost every single time that I went to my parents' house on every weekend, there was almost not any times period that I didn't see them. They always came up to, and I told you that the cotton field is right there, bordered right next to that wood line. So they would come up, and if literally, if I were to go into the backyard, because they had a chain link fence, and or even walk alongside the fence and walked right into the field, I'm right there face to face with them. They would come that close. And if I was out there for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, they would stand there and watch. They could be standing so still that you're like, is that a tree trunk? Am I really? Is it? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? So sometimes you got to take multiple pictures back to back to back to catch movement or blinking eyes, or capture. If you take video recordings on them, you will see that in real time when they're moving. Now, the strangest thing that I still can't make sense of, and I've only heard probably about four other people at this point to bring up when it comes to strange phenomena, is what I call the extremely loud metallic crash. Or have you heard missing 411 the hunted?
Yes.
What that story of what was the guy that disappeared? Tom Messick. Tom Messick. Do you remember when one of his friends talked about this? He heard this really strange sound that sounded like a really loud metal door sound, or whatever, metallic door, or like something in a shipping yard, like it had been dropped or like it had crashed closed. He mentioned that. Martin Groves, when I interviewed him on my show, mentioned that during his Dogman um, encounter and sighting in the LBL back in the 80s, no, I think it was the 90s, he also mentioned that metallic crash. And when Kuhnbo came here back in March, I think it was back in March of this year, and I took him out there to that property because he literally only lives like about 45 minutes away from where I live at now. And I took him out there to that property. What was interesting was that while we were back there overlooking that field, and I was showing him everything, showing him where the encounter happened at, showing him like the property and all that kind of stuff. We were back there by the pond, and all of a sudden, we both got this eerie feeling. Coonbo looked at me, and I looked at him. The hair was standing up on both our arms, and I said, "Do you feel that?" He said, "Yeah, we're being watched." And right after the words came out of his mouth, this extremely loud, if you ever have him on your show, ask him about it, extremely loud metallic crash, and came from like out of nowhere. We're in the woods. There's no explanation for this sound. And if I had to give you an example, explain how loud, so loud, if you take one of those industrial size metallic dumpsters that are like an apartment complex or a restaurant, you take that and put it up several thousand feet in the air and drop it down on concrete down below, that loud, and right there next to you, it's that loud. And plenty, I've only heard about four other people. And I mean, we just looked at each other. He said, they don't want us back here. That's the third or fourth time now on Dogman that I've heard about that. And one other thing, as far as what I've heard on audio, is that metallic scraping sound. But never heard it on never heard the scraping sound in real time. So it's just a lot of weird stuff when it happens to you when it comes to Dogman. It's just a lot of strangeness. I do know that they do have offspring. They do eat, and I've heard stories where they have been killed, and where they have killed people. So there's the flesh and blood aspect. So I'm not going to say that they're completely paranormal, and maybe some aren't, maybe some are partial. I have no idea, but it's just strange when it comes to them.
And I've had people like Ron Moorhead on my show, and Ron mentioned metallic sounds when they were out 8 miles deep in the woods out at their campsite. So that has occurred in Bigfoot sightings, and I've heard it with Dogman stuff on other channels and things like that as well. And I don't know what to make of it. And I've said it on my show before. I really don't know my cop brain. I was a cop for 16 years. So my cop brain always wants to put something in a box. And when I started doing this show and I was talking about Dogman with people, I've said it so many times. I don't know if they're flesh and blood. I don't know if they're paranormal. I just can't check that flesh and blood box because it doesn't make sense to me. But when I have people like you who have had encounters and you say to me, you think they're a little bit of both, I think that's probably as good as we can get at this point because nobody knows what any of this stuff is. But I have to agree with you. I think there's got to be something more to them. Things don't have self-illuminating eyes, right? This thing that you saw
Absolutely.
had glowing eyes. That's not a normal thing for anything in the animal kingdom that we know of that would be considered in the canid family or, primates or whatever the case may be. So that
Hmm.
in and of itself is almost like a paranormal thing that goes along with this flesh and blood creature that you saw. So I
Hmm.
it's just a fascinating subject to me, and I certainly want to get you can kind of close that out, and I want to move on to your next encounter as well.
Okay. Um, so after that, after that first encounter, what I started doing was I started recording all the time because I thought about it. And I'd heard several encounters where I heard people on these different podcasts say, eyewitnesses would say, well, it just snuck right up on me. Or I never knew it was there. Or I turned around and it was just there. But I never heard, as big as they are, whether it was Sasquatch or Dogman, as big as it is, then you would think I would have heard it walk up. But I thought about it really in depth because I'm like that type of person that I need stuff to make sense. I try to rationalize it. Why is that? Why do you not hear them walk up? What about if they're already there? What about the fact that a lot of people don't think about, well, if they're always peeking out from behind trees or from between the trees or from around bushes, then logically thinking, they're probably hiding in the trees a lot of the times when you don't see them. So that made me start recording. It made me say, well, that's the perfect cover for them. Why wouldn't they? I mean, if they're able to stand upright, they're able to like do all this other weird stuff. They can climb trees just as easily. So that made me start taking pictures, start doing videos. And so sometimes when I would go out and it would be daytime, I'd go outside of my parents' it's the side door, and I would sit on this big toy chest they had outside of the door and kind of record like from a safe distance, like back towards that opening in the woods, because I figured I'm out here, I'm smoking, and I think at that point, I'm not sure if I knew this yet. I think I found out later on, so I didn't know at the time. But from what I've heard later, tobacco draws them in. It draws in. I don't know about Bigfoot, but Dogman, tobacco and perfume or cologne draws them in. So I started recording because I figured if they are back there, since that first one came out that night, then I assume that they're probably watching people probably a whole lot more than we think. I'm going to capture one on video, or if not, then hey, at least I tried to see what was going on. So after sitting there long enough and taking my phone or whatever and recording, I saw them on multiple occasions. Sometimes I'd see them moving, sometimes I'd see them blinking their eyes. Um, I would capture movements, I would take several consecutive shots. And so the second dog man I can say that I ever saw after that first encounter, it's probably about a year later when I started sitting out there and recording, or maybe a few months later. I can't remember exactly now. But this one looked like what you would call I guess, the general dog man that you usually explain, Anubis, or the black German Shepherd dog man, elongated snout with upright pointy ears. I did not see it standing fully out in the open. It, as much as I could see of it, was its head, its ears, its snout, and that's about it. Up maybe to around the neck and shoulder area. The rest of its body was behind the trees. But that one I saw on at least two or three occasions that would come out and watch. And in that same picture, there is, I guess, lower below that, down towards the bottom of that picture, there, I guess, what I would say is either a baby or juvenile one also with it, and its head is also sticking out. So that's the second encounter. They never approached me, and if they did, I mean, the only time I would say if anything ever approached, then it would have been um, in its invisible form, if that is, and I don't want to sound crazy, but the only reason I would even say that that's possible is because catching an audio and nothing in real time was sniffing behind my head. Just take the biggest dog or take a werewolf and put that behind your head and picture that grunting and snorting. And it's right there, like that loud. So it's just weird when it comes to them. That's the second sighting or encounter. It didn't approach me or do anything like that. They always said it's safe distance and just watched. I never felt this overwhelming feeling of dread, but maybe one time I felt uncomfortable, and this was on. So that was the second encounter. The third time, the third time that I saw something, it was one of those days. It's in the daylight. I had my little dog Chloe. She's a little Yorkshire Terrier, little teacup Yorkie. Had her back there in the backyard at my house where I lived at. We didn't have a fenced-in backyard, so anytime I'd be at their house, I took every opportunity to take her out there and let her run free and have a good time. She would just be bopping around, having a good time, and she used to love tearing up soccer balls and stuff like that, and playing and barking. And one day we're back there in the backyard. I'm, kicking the soccer ball to her, and she's running to get it and tearing pieces off the soccer ball and having a good old time. And just at the same time I'm fooling with my phone and just like scrolling through on probably on Facebook, ain't no telling. But something in my mind said, "Look over there to the left." And when I looked over to the left and I looked, it's like it's weird because I don't know if it's your conscience or what it is, but something said, "Look over there to the left." And it's like I knew exactly where to look. I looked over to the left, look up in the tree, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" Because it was black. When I say black, I understand like this is broad daylight. This is light outside. It's not dark. It's not mid. It was broad daylight. This wasn't the shadows in the trees. This was blacker than black. So black that you're like, I'm like, that ain't no, that's not a shadow. It's jet black, real black, blacker than your truck or blacker than anything. That ain't no shadow. And at that moment, I said, "Chloe, let's go." And like I said, she was younger back then, so Chloe has still got full of energy. My dog is the type of dog like when you call her, she's not. If she's having a good time, it's like I don't care what you're saying. I'm like I'm gonna play. I'll walk up to her and try to like as soon as I put my hand down to try to pick her up, Chloe takes off full speed. My nephews used to chase her and try to catch her, and I used to call her Rocket back then because she was so fast. Chloe would not come. I'm like, "Chloe, let's go." I'm ready. I'm scared now because it's black, and I mean, there's something there, and something in my mind said, "Look over there." Your conscience warns you sometimes too. And so, since I heard that in my head, I was like, "Let's go, Chloe." And Chloe would not come. I had to like basically get minute like verbally Chloe. I had to cuss at my dog and like put my finger down and like make her hunker down to the ground for her to stop. So I picked her up finally, and when I picked her up and we got back towards the front of that fence before I got ready to go out the gate, I turned back. And when I turned back, I took about three, four, five, maybe six pictures or whatever back to back consecutively. And before I left that backyard, I looked at it. And when I looked at that picture, I was like, "Oh, hell no. Let me get that's it for today. That's it for today." I'd left out of that backyard so fast, Brian. I left out of that backyard so fast. And I didn't come back out and take no more pictures or video for the rest of the day because what I saw on that picture, there was more than one thing going on in that picture. There was an upright dog man standing up in the tree, but I didn't see that when I was in the fence. I didn't see that at all. I saw the black thing. That was also a dog man, but that one, all that was visible with that one was the head. But the head was so massive. The head was so massive that the head on this one was so massive, Brian, that I'm I'm just gonna have to show you the picture. It's unreal. That it would have had to been. 12 to 14. I can't even tell you. I'm not good at gauging that, but the head was way too big. Based on the side of that head, there's no way that had to have been 12 to 14 feet tall. I ain't never seen nothing like that in my life. I'm gonna have to show it to you. And it's, seeing is believing. Now, on this picture, what was disturbing about this particular one, all that was visible on the black one was its head. The rest of the body was behind deep cover of like leaves and trees. It's in the summertime. You could see its eyes. You could see it. It had that short nose, like I told you about, like the one in the first encounter, and it had the cropped ears. So it made me wonder: is this the one from that first encounter? Now I also wonder, did its head look extra big because I zoomed in on it a little bit? But when you see it, you're gonna see what I'm talking about. But the disturbing thing about it was that, you know how a dog, if you can just picture a Rottweiler or a pit bull, a dog that's got a shorter snout like that, but when they are like, I don't know how to call it, like they're, what do you call that?
When they're
Snarling at you.
snarling. Mhm.
Yeah, it had that, and you could see its teeth. They were sharp. It was snarling at me. It wasn't happy. It wasn't happy at all. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Just thinking back on that one, it was snarling at me. Now the other one, is I have, and when I don't say I named them, I guess I kind of did, or get to give a description for it when I explain them to people. So the second encounter one, I called that Anubis, or the Black German Shepherd Dog Man. This black one with that huge head, I really didn't name it. I'm just gonna say that it was either the same type as the one during the first encounter, or the same one, but its head was too big. So I'm gonna say that that one was the same type, but just a different one, but bigger. The other one that was also in that same tree that I did not see in real time, I called that one the wolf or husky type dog man, because you know how the wolf has the colorings where its head, neck, shoulder, and body might be like a dark gray, but the snout and the feet and the paws are like a really light gray or white. That's what the other one that was standing upright in the tree looked like. It had that. So you could, it was standing at a side profile, so you could see it, both ears on top of its head. You could see its head down to the neck and shoulder area. You could, it's turned like this, if you can see me right now. So I'm looking at it like this. The snout is going that way. It's light gray or white. Then it goes down to where you can see, you can't see the waist because there's branches and leaves that go across the waist just a little, but then directly below that, you can see the rest of the upper thigh, hock, and legs all the way down to its feet. The feet were the same color as the snout. So that to me was, I guess, when I would say the closest I was to them, because I was actually in the backyard on that occasion when I felt like, look over there to the left. So basically, to tell you how close I was to them, if I had, because I'm at the back of the fence. I'm not in the middle of the yard. I'm at the back of the fence. If I had climbed over the back of the fence, crossed the ditch, and walked up about 10 or 15 paces, that's how close they were to me. But they didn't, they just remained completely still. They didn't do anything. They were just watching. So I can say that, a lot of people say, well, dog men are dangerous, or they're bloodthirsty. I just don't know about that. I don't think that all of them are the same. I think maybe it depends on what you think about them, because there's some people who believe in the whole demonic theory or Nephilim. I do to a certain degree. I feel like these things have always been here. I feel like the ancient Greek mythology, the satyr, like goat man, Pan. I think that Egyptian mythology. They say it's mythology. I don't think it's mythology. you know, um, Anubis. You've got, like, what do you call the Minotaur? I think these people were depicting things that they saw back then, and that's just a theory. And now I might be completely wrong about that, but it's mighty funny how we are still reporting these same type of creatures today. You have flying humanoids that people talk about, and then if you look at it, you talk about like Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl in the ancient Aztec or Mayan cultures, and they talk about the plumed serpent. That's a flying serpent. So is that today's reptilian. So we're still reporting these things years later. I just think that I think these things have always been here. I just think that for whatever reason nowadays there's more reported sightings of this stuff because people have phones. People are going out deeper into the woods now. We're going into their territory further and cutting down trees. So now they're coming more into our territory, or we're building into theirs. So you're seeing them a lot more now. You know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the flesh and blood thing versus the supernatural or paranormal part of this dogman thing.
Hmm.
For me, I've had conversations with people and they've said, physical anthropologists I've had on the show in the past have said, they don't discount people's encounters. Obviously, I don't do that on my show. I don't. Some people exclude the woo and Bigfoot. They don't talk about Dogman. I talk about everything because people's experiences are their experiences. I'm not here to sit in judgment of anybody's encounters. I don't have anybody on the show that I don't believe believes that they've had an encounter with something they can't explain. That's how I always answer that question. Do people embellish their stories? Absolutely. Right. Everybody knows that. People fill in memory gaps. If they had an experience that happened in 1974 and it's now 2022, not everything that they tell you today is going to be exactly as it happened back then. But particularly with Dogman, I've never been able to reconcile in my brain how these things exist and walk upright as a we're basically talking about a werewolf type creature, right? We're talking about almost a half man, half dog kind of. At least that's a lot of the way it gets described. And it's very difficult for me to reconcile that in my brain and check that box. So I'll ask you, you've had these experiences, you've seen these things. How do you reconcile that as far as these things being able to physically exist, and you said they've always been here? How do you think they've hidden for so long? Do you think it is the fact that they're so deep in the woods and we only see them now because we're sort of encroaching? Is that why you think the things are happening more now than they have in the past, maybe?
I think so. I think we're encroaching into their territory. Now you got people that are going. There's more hunters and stuff like that that's going into the woods now and going way deeper into the woods. Urban exploration. You got us going out and camping, and you got people who are going out there to do research and look for these creatures, spending longer amounts of time out there. People are out there cooking in the woods and stuff like that. So you're doing all these different things. If you're a smoker, then that's something that's drawing them in. But we're building homes deeper into the woods also. So if you hear like these stories where you hear people talking about the dogman or Bigfoot or Sasquatch that come up on their property and they're tapping on the window at night. They're tapping on the window because you have built a home within the woods. You know what I'm saying? You're in the woods, you're in their territory. They've been there all these years. So, just the same way, like, I think sometimes we are a curiosity to them too. But I do think that they know what people are. I think that they're curious about us. I've heard people talk about the fact that they come up and there's several different reasons for it. I think a lot of the reasons for it too is that I think that they have another type of intelligence that's outside of what's normal for a regular animal. There's people who go out there and gift them. So when you go out and you're gifting these things, or you're going out there and you're feeding them, then sometimes you are inviting them back to your home by doing that. It's like how they say, don't feed a stray dog. When you feed stray dogs, you're going to have them coming back to your home looking for more. So if you do that, then, it's just so many different reasons why I think this is happening. If you've gone into their territory and you have gone out there and you're in an aggressive way, and they feel threatened by you, then maybe you've gotten too close to their nest. Maybe they are out there and they have their own offspring and they're trying to protect those. So if you come encroaching upon their territory, then they're going to come encroach upon yours. I think that there's different levels and different reasons for that. And I think, you just have to be mindful when you're going out there looking. Sometimes they don't want you on their territory. I think that they have different personalities, just the way people do, and just the way any animals do. You have animals that are more aggressive, and you got some that's more docile. I think the same thing that I think it applies to them too. And that's just my thoughts on it. But I do feel that sometimes we bring that on. I know that there's just so many different aspects of it when it comes to these creatures. I think I've heard several of the people that I've interviewed on my show. I've had Greg Yost on there, and a few other people who've been on the show who have talked about that they know your intentions when you go out there. They can tell if you're a good person or a bad person, if you're intending to come out there and harm them. And so I don't know how deep to feel about that, but I do know that there are people who have a bit habituated them to where they feel like they live comfortably with them on their property. I just wouldn't feel comfortable with it.
Let's talk a little bit about the mind speak or the telepathic communication. You mentioned that in your first encounter with these things. I literally spent almost 2 hours on the phone with a lady that I met a couple of years ago at the conference up in Tennessee, and she finally worked up the courage to come on and tell me about her encounters with Bigfoot on her property in Tennessee.
Hmm.
And she had very normal encounters with these things. She had a couple of sightings where she saw these things full on in her backyard over the creek. And then it got a little weirder towards the end of her 6.5 years, and to the point, spoiler alert, if this comes out before her show, her and her husband are moving off their property. I mean, their house is packed up and they're getting the hell out of there because of the Sasquatch encounters that she's had on the property, to the point where she can't even sleep at night because these things are crunching around on the rocks and coming up to the house. But during a couple of those encounters, she, again, like you said, she feels crazy even saying it, but she heard these things talking to her in her head. I've had people like Les Stroud on the show from Survivor Man. Survivor Man told me a story about him having a couple of situations where he was in the woods and he heard Sasquatch basically having a telepathic conversation with him in his brain where they're talking and he's answering.
Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Have you heard that a lot with Dogman? Obviously, you experienced it, and what do you think that says about the difference in the flesh and blood and then this paranormal part of the Dogman?
I've heard it quite often. I've had that one experience for myself personally. I've heard on some other encounter shows that I've listened to. Actually, somebody that I'm familiar with who used to be within my group. Um, he's a hunter, but he's also out in nature a lot, and he also mentioned to me during one of his Sasquatch Bigfoot encounters where he was afraid because I think a dog man had appeared to him. He was afraid, and so he had taken up his rifle to point it towards it. And what he heard in his head was, "If you take that shot, you're dead." Now I've heard this on other shows as well. So this was told to me personally by someone that I personally know. Then I've got other instances where I've heard on encounter shows where it said, um, the same thing. If you take that shot, you're dead. Or if you take that picture, you're dead. So I've heard people say often they know what cameras are and they know what guns are. When the person got ready to pick up their phone to take a picture, they got out of dodge or they hid behind the tree or they took off. Same thing with a rifle. They took off. Or their facial features changed like a look of shock or surprise, like, oh, like they just put. So they know there's a different area of knowing with that. So yeah, I think that yes, I think that mind speak is a real thing. I think that some people are more in tune with it than others, and I also think that sometimes they choose who to speak to, and if it's necessary to telepathically speak to people for whatever reason. Um, I do feel like that some people have more psychic type abilities where they are more in tune with hearing things than other people, and some people might actually be hearing their voice or hearing something in their head, and I think that they're just not aware that that was them speaking to you. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of my personal friends, he's actually an admin in my group, he had went out into the woods of Texas, and he actually had a Bigfoot sighting while he was out there, and he actually captured it on camera. Now, he told me that right before the Bigfoot, right before, I think I saw it on the picture because he took plenty of pictures. He said, a bobcat just crossed my path. But what's weird is that right before the bobcat crossed my path, I heard a voice say, a bobcat's getting ready to cross your path. And I said, he said, but what's strange about it is that at that same time, that's right after I had taken that picture. And that's the picture where he actually caught like a Bigfoot or whatever the creature, Dogman, Bigfoot, whatever it is on that picture. I saw it on the picture and he said, are you talking about this? He screenshot it, sent it to me. He said, is this exactly what you're talking about? I said, yeah, that. So we saw the same thing in the picture. He said, yeah, I actually saw that, but I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But he said he heard something say, it's a bobcat getting ready to cross your path. And it did. He said he had not even been thinking about a bobcat. That didn't even cross his mind. So I do feel like that's something that happens a lot more. I do know that people have talked about on some of these episodes that I've heard people say how dogmen have come and tap on their window, and they've tried to lure kids out into the woods before. It's a lot of different things when it comes to dogmen. Sometimes sinister. Um, and even when they have taunted people before, and even have you ever heard of people talk about that sometimes the dog man got this evil grin? I don't know
Yeah.
if you've ever heard that. Yeah, plenty of people talk about that, and I'm always wondering, is that, are you saying like it bared its teeth and it was snort? No, they said, I've heard a couple of people actually say no, it literally grinned at me, like almost taunting the person, like, yeah, this is happening right now, and I could do whatever I wanted to do to you in this moment. I've actually got a couple of episodes on my shows where people have talked about this, and it's just strange to me. So when it comes to them, the thing that I find, one of the things that I find most disturbing is that both Bigfoot and Dogman have the ability to open doors, come into people's homes. There's a case where, and it's disturbing because there's a case where a woman and her family, her kids, were in the house watching TV. And I don't remember if I heard this on Big Condiv show or what show I've heard this on. They're in there watching TV, and a dog man literally, I don't know, I can't remember if she left the door unlocked. I can't remember what the case was, but it came in there and was standing on 2 feet and it was snarling at her and her kids on the couch. But right about that time, just so happened her husband had pulled up at home, pulled up in the driveway. It turned his head back, heard that, and took off running out the door. Her husband saw it as it ran out the door. It's a lot of cases like that. There's a case where I heard about like the doggy door. Like this man came downstairs one night. I don't know if he was getting ready to go in his kitchen to get a drink of water. As he came down, there's a dog man with its head and shoulder and upper body, like hand reached out, like sticking through the doggy door. And I'm like, see. So that is just the kind of stuff like it's, these things are not normal. It's not normal. Maybe they are normal, maybe they've always been here, but it's disturbing. The fact that
Yeah.
they can open car doors too. They've been known to try to flip people's cars, like, and cut you off. There's been people getting ready. There's This is so much disturbing stuff when it comes to these things. It makes you afraid. There's been a few stories where I heard where somebody was driving a Jeep and it was open in the top and things jumped on top of the vehicle. And no,
Well, let's keep,
Dogman seemed to be a little more sinister when it comes to baiting, and then the tactics of sometimes ambushing you where there's one in the front and you're concentrating on that one that's in the front, but then there's a whole nother one over here behind you coming up from the backside, and you weren't even aware of that one. It's like, I don't know what you call it, like an ambush tactic. There's an ambulance story like that where they were trying to come up on the side of the ambulance. It's just crazy. There's a lot of stories out there right now. There's plenty of people who are credible eyewitnesses, judges, DNR officers, park rangers, military officials that have actually had these sightings. There's a lot of hot spots. The LBL, the most popular case that happened back in the 80s, and I'm sure you're aware of that one, with a family of 4 were killed. It's disturbing when it comes to Dogman.
well, let's talk a little bit about the evidence, right? I'm more on the Bigfoot side of things. I get people sending me tons of stuff all the time that listen to the show, and they have evidence that they've captured pictures. And I'm in the groups. We have our fans group, and people share things over there all the time. You get a lot of blob squatches. You get a lot of the red circle stuff. We were talking about that before we went on the air. How is it in the dogman realm? Are you seeing a lot of credible evidence as far as pictures and video? What are you seeing on that front? Is there anything that's really stuck out to you? Had you not had a seat, your own sighting that you would say absolutely 100% that is the real deal? That is something caught on camera or on film.
I have a friend. I'm going to call him Greg. I won't call his full name, but Greg knows who he is once he hears this episode. Greg has his own group, Bigfoot Truth, and Greg actually has some amazing pictures of Dogman. He's actually got some amazing pictures of Dogman. He shared them within his group, and he's also shared some on his channel. But he shared some with me personally, and then I've seen them. And he even has one with those red glowing eyes, a black one, which I would call like a black German Shepherd type. He's got a really good one of that, standing upright, and it's on his property. He goes out often. Um, he just released one. I'm gonna say probably like a couple of weeks ago, and I guess this was I don't know if he zoomed in on this. I don't know if Greg zoomed in on this picture to capture this, but he's got the full head and snout up close. That's a really good picture of this one. He's got something on camera because he has his trail cameras out there too. He asked me, "What do you think this is?" And I call it the deer, not deer. And the reason I said is so many weird things Greg has caught. Now, I call it the deer, not deer, because Greg said you can see that this deer's body on here, but where's its head? And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God. The the head was like, I can't even tell you right now, Brian. The head was like almost non-existent. And not only that, the one of the back legs, it was like it was morphing into existence. Is this a shapeshifter? Was this something in real time? This is on trail camera. This ain't nothing like he faked. This is like a trail camera that's actually on his property. That's not the only thing he's captured. Then one day he sent me a picture of something else that's coming on just on another trail cam on his property. It's coming underneath this downed log or downed tree. Um, it's leaning forward and getting ready to, like, if you can think about those post fences, those old wooden fences from back in the day with posts where you can fit through it and kind of climb through. It's going through there. It's like, I guess if you're a child and you're coming down arm first and getting ready to crawl through there, it's doing that. But I couldn't tell if it had horns on top of its head or pointy ears, but it was a weird looking thing with spindly arms, and you could see the whole upper body. Greg's got some good stuff. Um, I've been begging Greg. I've been trying hard to get Greg to come on the show. Greg is one of those type of people. He doesn't deal with controversy too often. He doesn't like that kind of stuff. I've been begging Greg. I'm trying to get him to come on, but Greg's got some of the best stuff I've seen. There's a few other people who've sent in really good stuff too, but for the most part, yeah, a lot of the stuff is blob squatch, pareidolia. I've got some really good pictures that I've taken of them, and I've got a couple of videos that I have of them that I've taken as well. So there are some out there. I will say that I feel like for the most part, because people are used to the drama and the ridicule that happens in groups and sharing pictures, some of the best stuff will not be shared. Because if it's too good, then it's Photoshop or it's a hoax. Because I've had that happen as well. And I actually, on one of my occasions with this, had to go out live on location to prove a point that it wasn't the tree stump. To prove a point and take a before and after picture. So that's important too. But no, it's a lot when it comes to it. There is evidence out there. There are pictures, there are videos, but for the people who have good stuff, they've got any type of relationship, or they want to keep the peace with these creatures that's on their property and or keep people away from their property. They don't want to share those pictures, or I've had people share them and say, "I'm just sharing this with you, but don't share this with anybody else." So yeah, there's good stuff out there. They just don't want it shared.
Well, you've mentioned it a couple of times. Let's talk about your show and let's talk about your group. How did those two things come about, and what can folks expect when they tune into your show? And what about the group?
Okay, so my show is called Cryptonormal Encounters. Let me see, Cryptonormal Encounters with B Moss. That's on YouTube. And my Facebook group is of the same name, Cryptonormal Encounters with B Moss. If y'all are interested in joining the group, Cryptonormal Encounters is not just only about Dogman. I do more stuff centered towards Dogman, but I do interviews with um, paranormal eyewitnesses, Bigfoot, any of that kind of stuff, because I think that somewhat, in some way, in a lot of ways, all these things are intertwined. And I think, people don't realize. I'm going to go back into the group, but there's a lot of things that need to be addressed with it, and maybe I can do it another time. But just basically, paranormal activity, dogman, Bigfoot, alien sightings, somewhat also intertwined, orbs and stuff like that, being all intertwined with that, and people don't realize that these things are going on too. So there's a lot of things that people don't realize. Paranormal activity also happens with people who've seen Bigfoot or Dogman. A lot of them have also had ghost activity and alien UFO sightings as well. So that's what my group is about. Um, Everybody gets a voice. Everybody gets to share their experiences, hunting, anything that they want to talk about. So that's why I called it Cryptonormal, Cryptid Paranormal.
It's a
So that's the group.
fantastic group. I've been a member for a couple of years now. You've always been great in the group. They're great moderators, and it is a safe space to share stuff. And you've allowed me to share the show over there, which I really appreciated early on, especially because you have a great audience and your show's fantastic. The links are
Thank
in the
you.
show notes. Everybody go over and subscribe on YouTube. Give her a listen. She has some fantastic guests. She does a really good job with the show. B Moss, I've so looked forward to talking to you, and you did not disappoint. You've been an absolute joy to have on the show, and I can't thank you enough for giving us
Thank
the time
you.
that you gave us.
Well, I appreciate you, Brian, and I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, I can talk to you again soon. I'd like to have you on the show as well. So I really thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Absolutely.